The chandelier above splintered the light into 1,000 tiny prisms, scattering across the white linen tablecloth. I gripped my water glass so tightly my knuckles turned bone white, refusing to let my mother see how her words had carved straight through me. "Amanda, you'll never measure up to your sister," she said, as if announcing the weather. A simple fact beyond debate. The scent of roasted salmon and buttery wine sauce filled the air. But her sentence landed heavier than stone, suffocating the room until silence pressed on every chest around the mahogany table. This was supposed to be Sierra's celebration dinner, her promotion, her moment to shine, yet I had rushed here after a 10-hour workday. Barely enough time to swap my wrinkled blouse for a clean one. Across from me, Sierra sat poised, her crimson dress as crisp as the smile on her lips, hair still perfectly in place after a full day at the office. She looked like she belonged under the spotlight, while I, as usual, was cast in shadow. My gaze shifted to my mother. Around her neck glimmered the pearl necklace I had given her 2 Christmases ago. The one she dismissed as not really my style, before wearing it to every single one of Sierra's milestones. Something inside me cracked then. A soundless snap, but loud enough that I knew I couldn't keep swallowing it anymore. I rose to my feet, pulled a folded mortgage statement from my purse, and set it on the table with a firm slap. The paper seemed flimsy, but it carried the weight of truth. For the past 2 years, I had been secretly covering the mortgage on this very house. My father shifted, startled, while my mother's eyes widened for just a moment before narrowing back into that familiar, dismissive look. She waved her hand, as if swatting away a gnat. "That's what family does," she said coolly. "Sierra needs to focus on her career. You're stable enough." The words made my stomach knot, pulling me back to the day of Sierra's college graduation, when they had handed her the keys to a brand new red Mazda wrapped in a giant white bow, while I received nothing more than a coffee mug with my alma mater's logo. "You're already established," Mom had explained then, as though I should have understood. Established. That word curdled on my tongue. I dug deeper into my bag and pulled out a thick stack of receipts, bank statements, cancelled checks, transfer slips, 2 years of sacrifice laid bare. "I've supported this family more than enough," I said, voice trembling but loud. "But I am not your ATM." My father's cheeks flushed, and he set his fork down hard. "Your sister is at a critical point in her career. You need to see the bigger picture." I looked at him, then at Sierra, whose brow furrowed with confusion. But for once, I didn't care how my words landed. I had been their crutch long enough, and all it had brought me was ridicule. "I'm done," I said, the steel finally rising in my throat. "I'm done with family dinners. And I'm done with family payments." The room froze, like the air had been vacuumed out. My mother's face hardened into something sharp and unrecognizable. "You'll regret this, Amanda," she spat. "Family is all we have in this world." I paused in the doorway, a strange lightness blooming in my chest for the first time in years. "Then I guess I have nothing," I whispered, before closing the door behind me. A week crawled by after that explosive dinner. Aside from the occasional text from Sierra, my parents stayed silent, as if my absence at the table meant I no longer existed. Then, on a gray Thursday afternoon, my phone lit up with my mother's name. Her voice was clipped, commanding. "Come help me organize my tax paperwork," she said. "You're good with numbers," a backhanded compliment wrapped in obligation. I agreed reluctantly, not knowing that buried in that pile of crumpled documents waited a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Stacks of papers leaned precariously on my mother's desk, receipts and envelopes spilling across the polished wood like a flood no one bothered to stop. I sat down, sighing, pulling the nearest pile toward me. My mother's footsteps echoed down the hallway as she busied herself elsewhere, her pearls clicking faintly with every movement. I told myself I'd get through this quickly. Sort her W-2s and 1099s. File the deductions. And leave. But then a familiar name leapt out from the corner of a page. My own. At first, I thought it was just a clerical mix-up. But as I looked closer, my chest tightened. It wasn't my student loan statement. It was Sierra's. Yet the transfer confirmation number at the bottom matched my bank account. My account. $19.400. Gone. My hand trembled as I flipped further through the stack, pulling out sheet after sheet. Car payments, credit card bills, designer clothing, restaurants, professional appearance, expenses, all stamped with my routing number. My name, my money. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls pressing inward. For 2 years, I had believed I was covering emergencies, a temporary mortgage payment, a short-term setback. But this was systematic, planned, expected. My parents had been siphoning my future away, dollar by dollar, to fund Sierra's lifestyle. What is this? My voice cracked when I finally found it, steadying only when the anger beneath my fear burned hotter. I hadn't even realized my mother was standing in the doorway until I looked up. Her pearl necklace glimmered against her white blouse as if mocking me. For a heartbeat, her eyes flickered, not guilt, not remorse, but annoyance at being discovered. "Did you find the mortgage interest forms?" she asked coolly, as if nothing were wrong. I slammed the statement down on the desk. "You used my account to pay Sierra's loans. $19,400. You can't just. You were helping the family." She interrupted, her tone so casual it stole the air from my lungs. Sierra's loans were the most pressing need. And the car payments? I shoved another sheet toward her, my hands shaking. $3,600. Whose idea was that? Transportation is essential for her position. My father's voice answered from behind her. He stepped into the room, glasses perched on his forehead, as if prepared to lecture me. "She meets clients. It's part of her career." "And the credit cards?" I fanned out several statements, the charges circling my vision like vultures. $9 over the last year alone. Restaurants, designer clothes, professional image matters in marketing. My mother replied without missing a beat. I turned to Sierra, who lingered in the hallway, thumbs still tapping at her phone. She finally looked up, shrugging, her expression infuriatingly detached. "I didn't ask for any of this," she muttered. "Mom said you were happy to help." Happy to help. The words tore something raw inside me. I thought of my own student loans, thousands still unpaid. I thought of the dentist appointment I had cancelled 3 times because I couldn't afford the procedure. I thought of the nights I skipped dinners, choosing ramen over real meals, just to make sure the mortgage payment cleared. And all this time, they had told Sierra I had extra money. The truth was brutal. I had been treated like the family workhorse, yoked to their ambitions, a beast of burden meant to carry the load quietly. Never celebrated, never thanked. Do you have any idea what this is doing to my life? My voice rose, firm now, fueled by something beyond rage. If I keep paying for all of you, I'll never have anything for myself. My mother blinked at me, genuinely confused, as if my financial future had never even crossed her mind. Family supports family, Amanda. We've always taught you that. Her eyes glimmered then, not with shame but with something sharper, colder. Sierra's wedding is coming up. Of course, you'll help with that too. She deserves the perfect day. The audacity of it left me momentarily speechless. They had taken $61 from me over 2 years, mortgage payments, student loans, car installments, credit card bills, and still, they wanted more. My stomach twisted so tightly I thought I might be sick. I gathered the papers, stacking them neatly, my hands steadying even as my heart raced. When I showed the binder of evidence to Diane later that night in a quiet corner of a cafe, she flipped through each page, her brow furrowing deeper with every receipt. The coffee between us grew cold, untouched. When she finally closed the binder, her voice was low but clear. "Amanda," she said, sliding it back across the table. "This isn't normal family support. This is exploitation." The word landed like a hammer blow, splitting the ground beneath me. Exploitation. Not help. Not duty. Exploitation. And once I saw it for what it was, I couldn't unsee it. That night, as I drove home with the binder heavy in my bag, a question looped endlessly in my head. Do I cut them off completely now, and let the fallout burn everything left of my family ties? Or do I ease out slowly, keep paying a little longer, give them time to adjust? One choice meant freedom, but maybe permanent estrangement. The other meant suffocating under the same weight for months. Maybe years more. And in the silence of my car, the only thing louder than my heartbeat was that single, searing question. What do you do when the people who should love you unconditionally only value you for what you can give? The night after the cafe meeting with Diane, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The binder still on the nightstand like a leaden presence I couldn't escape. Each page I'd organized: mortgage stubs, student loan transfers, car payment confirmations, burned into my memory until I could recite the totals without looking. $28,800 in mortgage, $19,400 in Sierra's student loans, $3,600 for her car, $9,200 in credit cards, $61,000. It echoed in my skull like a bell tolling the death of something I wasn't ready to name. I picked up a small leather notebook from the nightstand, one I'd bought months ago but never really used. That night I began writing. Page after page. Every call, every request, every time they said, "You know your sister needs this." Or, "Family is all we have." At first, it felt ridiculous, like I was keeping score. But soon, the entries became undeniable patterns, manipulation woven so seamlessly into my family's rhythm that I hadn't noticed I was dancing to it for years. The entries began to sound like case notes for a therapy session. January 15th. Mom asked for temporary help with property tax. Paid $1,200. Same weekend, saw pictures of her and Dad in Vegas with cocktails. March 2nd. Mortgage again. Dad promised to pay back. Nothing since. Each line was both a wound and a revelation. The story I had been fed, that this was all temporary, that family supported each other, was unraveling before my eyes. Replaced by something colder, harsher. A system where I was the provider, and they were the consumers. By the following week, the lack of sleep began to show. Dark circles pooled under my eyes. At work, I lost track of conversations, staring blankly at code until my boss snapped me back. "You okay?" he asked gently one Thursday morning after I missed a deadline for the first time in 3 years. "Fine," I lied, even though the weight on my chest made every breath feel like labor. Late that evening, my phone buzzed again and again with calls from cousins. When I finally answered one, my cousin Maria whispered, "There's a family meeting next week. Grandma says it's urgent. Are you coming?" I stared at the binder spread across my kitchen table. The color-coded tabs I had made. The totals highlighted in neon yellow. Urgent. It was always urgent, until the urgency was mine. I silenced my phone, setting it face down. But the thought nagged at me. If I skipped this so-called emergency, the narrative would write itself without me. They'd call me ungrateful, selfish, unstable. That night, Uncle Frank's words from our accidental meeting at the office replayed in my head. "I always thought you were the backbone of this family. Maybe they've been using that strength against you." That's when I decided I wouldn't just attend the family meeting. I would come armed, with the ledger, the binder, and every receipt. I would not let them twist the story again. For the first time, I realized I held the evidence. I held the truth. But another thought crept in as I organized the binder further: the bank notices. If I had paid every mortgage installment, then why had I found late payment warnings tucked inside my father's desk? It didn't add up. Late notices are usually sent after 30 days of non-payment, sometimes sooner if penalties apply. And yet, I had wired the funds without fail every month. My parents hadn't just taken my money. They had misused it. The realization made me nauseous. Were they juggling accounts? Covering luxuries first? Letting the house slip into delinquency? If so, the entire story about hardship was a facade. The truth was worse. They weren't drowning. They were gambling with my lifeline. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples, staring at the glowing total at the bottom of my spreadsheet. $61. Not just money. It was 2 years of my life. 2 years of opportunity cost. 2 years of being invisible while my sister was paraded as the golden child. And now, they expected me to cover her wedding too. As the night stretched into early morning, I whispered into the silence, "No more." The decision settled in me. Heavy but steady. I would walk into that dining room next week not as their ATM. Not as their overlooked daughter. But as someone with proof. Someone who could finally force them to look at what they had done. When my phone buzzed again, Mom's name lighting the screen this time, I let it ring out. Then I picked up the binder, pressed my palm against its cover, and whispered a vow to myself. This time, the truth won't stay buried. The following Tuesday, I parked my Toyota 2 houses down from my parents' colonial-style home. The binder sitting like a silent weapon on the passenger seat. My stomach churned with nerves. But Uncle Frank's voice echoed in my mind. Don't let them control the narrative this time. You've got the truth in black and white, don't back down. I slipped the binder under my arm, squared my shoulders, and walked up the path lined with neatly trimmed hedges that suddenly felt like walls closing in. Inside, the familiar lemony smell of furniture polish hit me as my mother opened the door. Her smile tight, more performance than welcome. You're early, she said, the faintest edge in her tone. Good, I replied, brushing past her toward the dining room. We'll need time. The mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, polished to a mirror shine, as though appearances might hold the family together a little longer. My father sat stiffly at one end, arms folded, Sierra perched uneasily at the middle, scrolling through her phone, her crimson manicure flashing with each swipe. I placed the binder in the center of the table with a soft but deliberate thud. The sound was louder than it should have been, pulling everyone's gaze toward me. What's this? Dad asked, already suspicious. 2 years of payments, I said, my voice steady. Let's start with the mortgage. I flipped to the first tab, each statement highlighted. Every transfer confirmed. 24 payments, $1,200 a month. That's $28,800 in total. My mother's brows shot up, her lips parting. That can't possibly be right. She stammered. It's all there, every cent. I turned another page. Next. Student loans. $19,400. Sierra's loans. Not mine. Sierra's phone slid from her fingers, clattering against the table. What? She whispered. Car payments. I continued, ignoring the tension mounting in the room. $3,600. And credit cards. Restaurants. Designer clothes. Work trips. $9,200. By now, my father's face had paled, his fingers drumming against the polished wood. My mother sat frozen, the pearls at her neck rising and falling with each shallow breath. I flipped to the summary page. The figure highlighted in neon yellow, $61,000. That's what I've paid in the last 2 years to keep this family afloat. Sierra blinked rapidly, eyes darting from me to the binder. That's more than I make in 3 months. She said softly. You offered to help, Mom said finally, her voice sharpening like a blade. Half those payments were gifts. Family gifts. I slid a manila folder across the table, the stack of copies landing with a satisfying weight. Would you like to go through them one by one? Every check, every wire transfer. Nothing about this was voluntary generosity. It was exploitation. This is ridiculous, Dad muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. Sierra hesitated, then reached for the folder. As she flipped through the pages, her confident posture deflated. She stopped at one statement, designer suits billed to her account but covered with my transfer. Her voice shook. I had no idea. Mom told me you were happy to help. She said you had extra money from your tech job. I let out a bitter laugh. Sharp and hollow. Extra money? I still have my own student loans. I've been postponing dental work because I couldn't afford it. There was never extra. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. My mother rose quickly, smoothing her cardigan. We're in the middle of something, she said, trying to wave it away. That'll be Uncle Frank, I said evenly, not looking up from the binder. My father's head snapped toward me. Frank? Why would? But it was too late. Uncle Frank's booming voice filled the entryway. Hello. Hope I'm not late. A moment later, he strode into the dining room, his weathered face set in a serious expression. He nodded toward the binder. I see Amanda's showing you the numbers. You knew? Mom demanded, her face flushing. I suspected, he said firmly, pulling out a chair beside me. Family helps each other in emergencies. Not as a permanent arrangement. What you've done to Amanda is not right. Silence blanketed the room, thick and suffocating. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came. My father shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the polished table. Sierra broke the stillness, her voice small but sharp. Yesterday Jenna asked why Amanda never comes to family events anymore. She thought something was wrong. Maybe she was right. That's none of their business. Dad barked, but even he sounded unconvinced. The dining room was heavy with things unsaid until Sierra's phone pinged. She glanced down, then looked up, her eyes wide. It's from the mortgage company, she said, her voice trembling. They've sent a late notice. The words hit the table like a grenade. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's carefully maintained mask cracked. And for the first time in years, I didn't scramble to fix it. I sat back, watching the facade crumble, the binder of evidence glowing like a spotlight in the center of the table. The house of cards they had built was collapsing, and this time, I wasn't rushing to hold it up. 2 days after the confrontation, I found myself once again at my parents' kitchen table. The same lemon polish smell hung in the air, but the room felt smaller now, shrunken under the weight of what had been exposed. My father's smile was strained, his fingers tapping nervously on a stack of cookbooks, as if the rhythm might distract from the unpaid bills peeking out beneath them. Amanda, he began, clearing his throat. We've been thinking. We understand your concerns about the financial arrangements. My mother nodded too quickly, her pearls rattling softly. Families should acknowledge each other's contributions. We may not have done that enough with you. Her words sounded rehearsed, the tone brittle, like a fragile mask about to crack. Then came the compromise. If I resumed covering the mortgage, they said, they would make sure everyone knew how much I'd helped. My father leaned forward, earnest in his performance. Think about what you're risking. Amanda, family relationships can't be repaired once they break. Is that what you want? 2 months ago, those words would have pierced me like arrows. 2 weeks ago, I might have negotiated, clinging to any scraps of validation. But now, I opened my laptop. I've accepted a new position, I said, turning the screen toward them. Software architect at Meridian Tech in Seattle. I start next month. The color drained from my mother's face. Seattle? That's across the country. The salary is $135. I continued calmly, sliding a spreadsheet into view. That's $33,000 more than I make here. And without supporting this household, I'll save an additional $3,200 every month. My father blinked, trying to smile. That's wonderful, honey. But I cut him off. I've been paying for the privilege of being disrespected. That arrangement is over. For once, silence served me, not them. The truth rang louder than their attempts at guilt. At that moment, my phone buzzed. A text from Uncle Frank. Everyone's here. Ready when you are. My mother frowned, suspicious. What's going on? I closed my laptop and stood, shouldering my bag. Sierra's dinner starts in 30 minutes. I said, slipping past them. The restaurant hummed with laughter and conversation as I entered the private dining room Uncle Frank had reserved. The smell of garlic butter and roasted chicken hung in the air, the clinking of glasses filling the space. Sierra sat at the head of the table in a cream-colored dress, radiant, surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in months. My parents trailed behind me, confusion flickering across their faces like shadows. What is this about? My mother hissed in a low voice. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked straight to Sierra, placing a silver-wrapped gift box in front of her. The paper shimmered under the chandelier's light. Amanda? Sierra's voice faltered. What's this? I raised my voice just enough for the entire table to hear. Open it. Her hands trembled as she tore the paper away, revealing a leather-bound portfolio. When she flipped it open, her smile dissolved into shock. Page after page of financial records stared back at her. Mortgage payments, loan transfers, car notes, credit card statements. It's all there, I said evenly. $61,000 over the past 2 years. My gift to you. The truth about who's been supporting you. Gasps rippled through the room. Aunts and uncles leaned in, murmuring, their eyes darting between Sierra and me, then toward my parents. who stood frozen near the doorway. Sierra's eyes filled with tears. She clutched the portfolio as if it weighed 100 pounds. I never knew, she whispered, her voice trembling. Then she turned to our parents, her expression hardening. How could you? This isn't the place. My mother tried to intervene, but Sierra slammed the portfolio shut. No, she snapped. This is exactly the place. We need to fix this. Here and now. Uncle Frank rose from his chair, his presence towering. Your sister has been carrying this family while being treated like she's the failure. Enough is enough. The murmurs grew louder, some relatives shaking their heads in disbelief, others whispering accusations. My father's face turned crimson, his gaze locked on the floor, while my mother's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. The truth had been spoken aloud, witnessed, undeniable, and as Sierra stood beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly, I realized the golden child finally saw the cracks in her pedestal. That night, under the warm light of the restaurant, I felt something uncoil in my chest. A knot I had carried for too long began to loosen. The weight wasn't gone, but it was lighter, shared, no longer mine alone. Seattle's skyline flickered in my imagination for weeks before I ever boarded a plane. Each day at my old job in Austin felt heavier, like I was wearing shackles no one else could see. But every time I looked at the job offer letter saved on my laptop, a strange fire lit in my chest. A future that belonged to me, and only me, was finally real. The fallout back home was swift and merciless. After the dinner reveal, word spread among relatives faster than I thought possible. Aunt Patricia called, voice shaking, demanding to know if the rumors were true. You've been paying their mortgage? Their bills? Amanda, that's not family duty, that's theft. I could hear my mother in the background, shouting, insisting it was help, not theft. But for the first time, people didn't believe her. Days later, Uncle Frank phoned me again. Your parents are considering selling the house, he said bluntly. Without your monthly payments, they can't keep up. His tone wasn't triumphant, it was heavy. Resigned. They've built their lives around the idea that you'd always be there to patch the holes. A part of me felt a twinge of pity, but it evaporated when I remembered the Vegas photos. The designer clothes, the smug dismissals. They weren't drowning, they had been partying while I held my breath underwater. At work, Diane helped me calculate exactly what life would look like without the family-shaped hole in my wallet. She spread spreadsheets across her dining table, her calculator clicking rapidly. Without their drain, you'll pay off your loans in 3 years instead of 15, she announced, circling the numbers. Do you realize what that means? Freedom before you're 35. Freedom. The word pulsed in my veins. I spent my last weeks in Austin packing boxes labeled with black marker. Kitchen. Bedroom. Books. Undecided. The hardest box to fill was undecided. Inside, I placed the family photo albums, smiling vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, pages filled with memories of people who looked loving, kind, safe, strangers. Really, every time I touched the glossy paper, I questioned whether the love had been real, or if it had always been conditional. Measured in dollars. The day I left, the sky was overcast, a dull gray shroud over the city I once called home. My parents didn't show up to say goodbye. Sierra did. She stood by my car, clutching the leather portfolio I'd given her, eyes red from nights of crying. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. I should have seen it. You weren't supposed to see it, I replied softly. They made sure of that. She hugged me tight, the kind of hug that tries to stitch together something long torn. Promise me you'll live for yourself now, she said, her voice breaking. I promise. The drive out of Austin felt surreal, the city fading in the rearview mirror as if erasing itself from my story. By the time my plane touched down in Seattle, the air smelled different, salt and pine and rain. My new apartment was small, but when the morning light streamed through the window, painting gold across the hardwood floor, I felt something I hadn't in years: ownership. This space was mine. My first month at Meridian Tech was a blur of onboarding and client meetings. But my boss pulled me aside within weeks. Your client satisfaction scores are the highest in the department. she said, pride shining in her eyes. The Reynolds account specifically requested you for their next phase. I smiled, not shrinking, not deflecting, not apologizing. Thank you, I'm proud of the work. Later, during a company dinner, a colleague asked casually about my family. The question would have once sent my stomach spiraling. Now, I set down my butter knife. Steady, my parents and I are taking some space. I said evenly, my sister and I are learning to rebuild. Honestly this time, no shame colored my words. Just truth. On weekends, I started exploring. One Saturday morning, I joined a hiking group bound for Mount Rainier. The mountain towered 14.411 feet above sea level. Draped in snow and clouds. Visible even from 60 miles away in Seattle. The trail was grueling, but every step upward felt like a metaphor carved into my legs. This climb was mine. Not for Sierra, not for Mom, not for Dad, for me. At the summit, the world stretched endlessly, pine forests rolling into the horizon. Glaciers glittering like shards of glass. The air thin and pure. I stood there, lungs burning, eyes wet, whispering into the wind. I made it. That evening, back in my apartment, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes steady. The woman staring back wasn't the hunched, exhausted daughter who used to fold under her mother's words. She was someone new, someone I'd been fighting to become. Seattle didn't just give me a job. It gave me a rebirth. 6 months had passed since I first unpacked in Seattle, and yet sometimes I still woke expecting to hear my mother's voice. Sharp as broken glass, telling me what I owed. But when the morning sun streamed through my apartment's tall windows, painting golden stripes across the dining table, the only sound was the soft hiss of my coffee maker. Freedom had a sound, I realized. It sounded like silence. My student loan app sent me a notification that morning. Another $2.400 payment processed. I stared at the shrinking balance, marveling at how quickly the numbers were dropping without the endless drain of my parents' bills. The projection showed payoff in just 3 years instead of 15. 3 years. For once, the math worked in my favor. Diane called over video, her Atlanta kitchen glowing in the background. She grinned as soon as my face appeared on screen. Look at you. Seattle suits you. You seem lighter. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that bubbled up from somewhere deep instead of breaking off halfway like it used to. I closed 2 major projects this quarter. My team lead says I'm on track for promotion by December. And no one taking credit for your work this time? Diane teased. Not a soul, I said, savoring the words. She tilted her head. What about that hiking group you mentioned? I glanced at the flyer stuck to my fridge with a magnet. We're planning a weekend trip to Mount Rainier next month. Just saying it filled me with anticipation. The promise of standing once again beneath the towering glaciers. Breathing thin, clean air that felt like a baptism. Diane smirked knowingly. And that's someone you mentioned last time? The one you weren't sure about? Heat crept into my cheeks. It's early, nothing serious. But I'm allowing the possibility. That's the real victory, she said softly. That evening, my company hosted a dinner at a downtown banquet hall. The room buzzed with conversation. Chandeliers throwing warm light across white linen and polished glasses. My department head waved me over. There she is, she announced proudly. Amanda's client satisfaction scores were the highest in the company this quarter. The Reynolds account requested her by name. Applause rippled around the table. My cheeks warmed, but instead of shrinking into my chair as I might have once, I lifted my chin. Thank you, I said, steady. I'm proud of the work we've done. The words tasted unfamiliar but good, like finally speaking my own language after years of silence. Later, the woman beside me asked casually, "Do you live near family?" I braced for the old knot of shame. The instinct to invent excuses. But the knot never came. I spread butter on a roll and answered simply. My parents and I are taking some space. My sister and I are rebuilding. Families can be complicated, she said with a sympathetic smile. Yes, I replied calmly. And sometimes they're exactly what they appear to be. The weekend came quickly. Diane flew in, and Uncle Frank drove up. The 3 of us gathering in my small living room. Takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. Uncle Frank raised his glass of Pinot Noir, his weathered face breaking into a grin. To Amanda, who taught me it's never too late to choose your real family. To building the family you choose. Diane added, not just the one you're born into. Our glasses clinked, the sound bright and resonant, like a bell signaling a new beginning. I sat back, letting their words wash over me, feeling them settle into my bones. That night, as I prepared my pack for the rainier hike, I paused by the mirror again. The woman staring back had clear eyes and steady hands. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was alive, fully, finally, and for the first time in decades. She belonged completely to herself. The rain fell softly against my Seattle apartment windows the following Saturday morning. A rhythm that once might have made me feel small and lonely. But now, the sound was a reminder. I had built a life where even the quiet belonged to me. Diane had flown in the night before, and Uncle Frank had already made himself comfortable on my couch, flipping channels while nursing his morning coffee. It was the kind of ordinary domestic scene that felt extraordinary, family. But chosen. That evening, we ordered Thai takeout and spread it across my tiny dining table. Boxes of noodles and curry steamed while laughter filled the room. Uncle Frank lifted his glass again, this time with a sly grin. To Amanda, he said, who finally stopped letting other people write the checks, and the story. Diane chuckled, adding, and to the people who show up because they want to. Not because they want something. My phone buzzed on the table. Sierra's name lit the screen. For a moment, I hesitated, the old instinct to brace for another request tightening in my chest. But this time, the message was different. I took over Mom and Dad's mortgage last month. They weren't happy. Dad even suggested I ask you to help until I'm stable. I told him I've been stable for years, just never financially independent. That's changing now. I read the words twice. The knot in my chest loosening just a little. Then came more. It's harder than I thought. Budgeting, cutting back, but it's also satisfying. I think I understand now what you've been trying to tell me. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I set the phone down slowly, letting the message sink in. Sierra was struggling. Yes, but this was her struggle to own. And for the first time, she wasn't handing it to me. Later that night, curiosity pushed me to ask Diane, do you think people like Sierra can really change? Diane wiped sauce from her fingers. Thoughtful. People can learn, if they're forced to live in reality. It's like finances, until you feel the weight yourself. You can't respect the limits. Uncle Frank chimed in, his voice gravelly. Boundaries are the tuition of adulthood. You paid theirs for too long. Now it's her turn. The next morning, I woke to another message from Sierra. Mom and Dad want to visit you. I told them it's your choice. Not mine. But I'd like to come see you alone. Maybe in spring. Just me. No strings. I stared at the words, torn between skepticism and a fragile thread of hope. Part of me wanted to believe she could really separate herself from their manipulation. Another part of me whispered caution. Forgiveness was not the same as opening the door to exploitation again. Still, I typed a reply. Not ready for Mom and Dad yet. But I'd love to show you Seattle in the spring. When I hit send, the decision felt right, not absolute, not permanent, but mine. That afternoon, as Diane and Uncle Frank headed out to catch flights, Uncle Frank clapped me on the shoulder. Don't forget, kid, he said, family isn't who drains you. Family's who lifts you. The words lingered long after he left. That night, before bed, I pulled out my journal. On one page, I wrote 3 columns. Debt paid. Boundaries set. Family chosen. Then I added one more. Future plans. Underneath it, I scribbled. Climb rainier. Learn to say no without guilt. Let Sierra earn her own freedom. It wasn't a ledger of losses anymore. It was a roadmap forward. The email arrived late on a Tuesday. Its subject line simple. Let bygones be bygones. My parents' names appeared together in the sender field. Though I knew it had been my mother who typed it. The words inside were predictable. Almost mechanical. We all make mistakes. Family should move past them. We'd like to visit you in Seattle soon. To put this behind us. Behind us. As if $61,000 could be swept into the past with a few keystrokes. As if my sleepless nights, the ramen dinners, the postponed medical bills were merely a phase. I closed the laptop and pulled out a plain white envelope from the drawer. A letter I'd been drafting but hadn't sent. Inside, in my own handwriting, were 3 clear conditions. Acknowledge what you did. Apologize without excuses. Never ask me for money again. I slipped the paper back into the envelope but left it unsealed. The letter wasn't for them. Not yet. It was for me. A reminder that reconciliation without accountability was just another trap. That weekend, Sierra called. Her voice sounded tired, but different, weighted not by entitlement but by effort. Budgeting is harder than I thought. She admitted. I tried the 50-30-20ths rule you told me about. It's not easy cutting back on the things I used to buy without thinking. But when I paid my own credit card bill in full this month, it felt good. I smiled faintly. That's how independence feels. It hurts at first. Then it starts to feel like strength. She hesitated. Mom says you'll forgive them eventually. She thinks you'll come around once you've cooled off. I'm not interested in cooling off. I said gently but firmly. I'm interested in change. And so far, I don't see it in them. There was silence on the line. Then Sierra whispered, I think I finally see it. Though, the way they used you. The way they shielded me. I'm sorry, Amanda. Her words were raw, unpolished, and they carried a weight apologies from my parents never had. For the first time, I let myself believe she might truly be learning. That night, I added another entry to my journal. On the left page, I listed everything I had carried for them. Mortgage, loans, cars, credit cards. On the right, I wrote what I was carrying now. My own student loans. My career, my peace. The difference was staggering. I remembered an article Diane once sent me. About the cycle of financial parentification, when children are forced to shoulder adult responsibilities. Often at the expense of their own futures. Therapists called it a hidden trauma. One that warps self-worth for years. I realized I had been living that trauma. Convincing myself it was duty. But now, I was stepping out of it. One line item at a time. The next morning, I tucked the unsealed envelope into my desk drawer. It wasn't time to send it. Maybe it never would be. But knowing it was there, that I had defined the terms of my forgiveness, made the air feel lighter. When I stepped onto the balcony, Seattle's sky stretched gray and endless. But it no longer felt oppressive. It felt wide open, like possibility. The rain in Seattle that night was the soft, silver kind, whispering against the glass as if the city itself was humming me to sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes I still hadn't bothered to finish sorting. One of them was labeled undecided. Inside lay the old family photo album, its leather cover scuffed at the edges. I opened it slowly, flipping past Christmas mornings, birthday candles, vacations where everyone was smiling too wide. For years, these pictures had felt like proof that love had once existed here. Tonight, they looked like costumes from a play I had never been cast in. Still, I didn't throw it away. I closed the album and placed it back in the box, marking it not discard but keep. Not because the past was beautiful, but because I was finally strong enough to look at it without flinching. My phone buzzed with a new message, an offer letter amended with a promotion. Meridian Tech had accelerated my track. The salary boost wasn't just money, it was validation. For the first time in years, my work, my effort, my worth were seen without being funneled into someone else's narrative. I leaned back against the wall, thinking of Sierra's last message. I want to visit just me. No mom, no dad. I want to see who you've become. The thought no longer filled me with dread. Maybe, in time, she and I could build something real. But with my parents? The unsealed envelope in my drawer said it all. They hadn't earned their way back in. The weekend arrived with a brightness rare for Seattle. Diane and Uncle Frank came over, filling my small apartment with the warmth of chosen family. We laughed over cheap takeout. Wine glasses clinking. Uncle Frank raised his glass again, his eyes twinkling. To Amanda, who taught me it's never too late to choose yourself first. Diane added softly, to building the family you choose. Not just surviving the one you're born into. We drank, and in the stillness that followed, I felt it, the truth anchoring in my bones. The cycle had ended. I wasn't the ATM anymore. I wasn't the overlooked daughter. I was simply Amanda. Later that night, as I packed a small day bag for a hike, I slipped in the ticket stub for the Rainier group trip I had signed up for. The mountain loomed in my mind, 14,000 feet of snow and sky, waiting for me to climb it with no one on my back. Just me, my legs, my breath, my future. I glanced at the mirror one last time before bed. The woman staring back stood tall, eyes clear, lips curved in a quiet smile. She wasn't afraid of her reflection anymore. She was ready. The rain had stopped. Tomorrow, the mountain awaited.